So, you thought you got rid of me after yesterday's botched video. The last 20 minutes of the video were cut off, the sound was unsynchronized with the image. In short, it was an apt metaphor for my biography. And so I console myself in Minnie's company, the only woman I will never ever discard or devalue. Of course, as long as she serves my needs and gives me coffee. Which leads me to today's topic. And today's topic is, why do narcissists love borderlines and why do borderlines hate them back? Now, this is a complex subject because it involves, again, the issue of mortification and the narcissist's need from time to time to take a vacation from his false self. Now, I've dealt with these issues in the previous videos, so bear with me because I'm now responding actually to many of your questions. Let's start with one comment that I had received, and someone asked, what's the difference between narcissistic injury and narcissistic mortification? That's actually a pretty easy one. Narcissistic injury is the challenge to the narcissist's grandiosity. Mortification is a challenge to the entirety of the false self. The whole false self is threatened. It crumbles. It's unable to maintain defenses and pretensions. The grandiosity is so massively undermined that everything falls apart, the very foundation of the false self. So the piece of fiction, because the false self is like a script or like a movie or like a piece of fiction, the piece of fiction confronted with harsh reality, countervailing information, aggression by others, hatred, criticism, and so on and so forth, cannot withstand the attack and cannot integrate the material fast enough, cannot reframe it fast enough so as to support the grandiosity, and the whole edifice crumbles. And this is a process we call decompensation. Decompensation is when all defense mechanisms are disabled simultaneously, and the narcissist acts out in a way that I will describe a bit later. Another question I received, what's the difference between internal mortification and being a doormat? Yes, I'm serious. Because internal mortification is when the narcissist takes all the responsibility on himself. He has autoplastic defenses. He says, it's all my fault. I misbehave, or I made it happen, or I'm guilty, and I'm ashamed, and I want to repent, I have remorse, and so on and so forth. This does happen with narcissists. It's a common myth that narcissists don't go through these stages. Even psychopaths do. But whereas a normal or a healthy person would feel guilty and ashamed because of what they had done to others, the narcissist feels guilty and ashamed because of the impact that his own actions had on him and on his false self. In other words, the narcissist would feel guilty and ashamed not because of the hurt and pain and damage he caused other people, but because they had succeeded in leveraging this negative energy that he had given them to mortify him. So, for example, the psychopath would be mortified if he is caught red-handed in flagrante doing something wrong. But not because he's doing something wrong, but because he had been caught. Same with the narcissist. Narcissist would say, I'm guilty, I misbehaved, I shouldn't have done it, and so on. But what he means to say, I shouldn't have led to a situation where I had been mortified. Let's regress a bit and before we discuss the issue of borderlines and narcissists and the intricate and tortured relationship between them, let's regress a bit to tackle this issue of doormat or internal mortification by reminding you what Libby had said. Libby in 2006, Libby, L-I-B-B-E-Y, 2006 made a presentation based on Lansky's work in 2000. And she said that narcissistic mortification is a systemic challenge. The whole narcissist collapses. There's no such thing as a narcissist. It's empty there. There's nobody home. It's a hall of mirrors. I keep saying that, keep reminding you. Because people relate to the narcissist as though it's an entity, a person. It's not a person. It's a facade, it's a mirage, it's a kaleidoscope, it's a phantasm. But everything depends on sleight of hand. Everything depends on pretending, on colluding in the narcissist delusional fantasy. If you challenge it, if you undermine it and so on, narcissist vanishes, poof, into thin air. And he experiences his own vanishing. It's excruciating, it's debilitating, and it's life-threatening. So, Libby suggested that the need to reframe narcissistic mortification is because it threatens the integrity of the self. There's a sudden awareness by the narcissist of his limitations, of his defects, that he is not perfect, that he is not brilliant, that he is not loved, universally loved, that he is not admired, that he is not omnipotent, all-powerful, that he is not omniscient, all-knowing. He suddenly realizes that he's pretty miserable and, freak. And it's difficult to accept for a normal person, let alone a narcissist. And when they are faced, the narcissists are faced with their own hopeless, unlovability, badness, worthlessness, smallness in a way, not being special even. It mortifies them. It creates shock, exposure. The narcissist feels exposed. He feels skinless. Borderlines describe the same. Borderlines have an inner emptiness. But the narcissist is protected by the false self. That is his external skin, his exoskeleton. And when it vanishes, he becomes essentially a borderline. Rothschild, who was a scholar of borderline personality disorder, described borderlines as failed narcissists. So when the narcissist loses this protection, loses his skin, he becomes as vulnerable, as labile, as dysregulated, as discombobulated as any borderline. He becomes a borderline. The shock, the exposure, the intense humiliation. Sometimes he even develops somatic symptoms, conversion symptoms. I don't know, heartbeat diseases. It feels like being annihilated, like disintegrating, like Dali's famous painting Galatea, where the back of her head becomes dissipated molecules. She evaporates. And of course, the narcissist has to cope with it somehow.